Welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to look at PBR maps. We're going to do a quick cloth simulation. We're going to add a V-Ray material to that cloth and we're going to render it out. So let's get started. We're going to need a scene with some objects that we'll create in a moment. You're basically going to need a sphere and a plane. And let me just go to my perspective view here. So let's create these. Let me just delete these two. And we have a camera and we have a light. So just so that we can see something if we render it out. So now we're going to create a little sphere. Just add a sphere. We go to keyboard entry and we want this at 0 and we want it to be 15 centimeters in radius. There we go. And if we go to the options for the sphere, we want to make sure that we have some segments. So 32 is good for this simulation. And then we're going to create a plane. So we go to standard primitives and where is now plane? And once again we go to keyboard entry and we say we want this 150 centimeters by 150 centimeters. Create this. It's going to be at 0, 0. So we want to move this up on the z-axis about 50. It's too much. Let's go 30. 30 is good. And you want to make sure that this plane also has a few segments. So 32 by 32 is pretty good. And I'll show you what I mean. So if you look at it now, it needs some geometry. It needs vertices to calculate collision when we add a cloth modifier to this. Okay, so go down to your modifier list. You're going to type in cloth and select cloth. Go to your object properties and you want to add the sphere to this simulation. The sphere is going to be a collision object and you can leave all the settings at default. Then you go to the plane. We want to make sure this is a cloth and we're going to make it cotton. And we're going to leave everything at default. Hit OK. And then in the settings in the sidebar here, you want to make sure that you have self collision enabled. Set it to a value like 3 and scroll back up. Hit simulate and you'll end up with a nice little cloth. Once you've got the shape that you desire, let's go back to shaded mode. So now we have our, let's go to our camera view. Now we have our cloth draped over our sphere, and if we render this out, it's not great. So it has nothing applied to it. So let's apply a material to this. You want to open your material editor, and I've already created this material, but you can just delete this, create a new one. So in your sidebar, you want to grab a V-Ray material, drag it in here, and you can there's multiple ways you can apply this to this garment. You can right click on it with the garment selected and assign material to selection, or you can grab the output and just drag it onto it and it will apply it as well. So now if you render it out again, you see you've got the V-Ray material applied, but it still doesn't look great. So what do we need to make this look realistic? This is where PBR mapping comes in. PBR maps is a series of pictures that tell V-Ray what to do with the color and the surface of a specific material. Okay, so the material that I'm going to be using for this tutorial, you can download for free at cc0textures.com. I'm going to use the Fabric 33. I downloaded this texture and let's just go to it. And I added a USAT in Photoshop, added a USAT to it to make it blue because I like blue more. But you can do that inside V-Ray as well. I'll show you how to do that now. So go to your material editor. There's a bunch of ways that you can get your maps in here. You can drag off the pin and go to general and select the bitmap. And then you can browse to the location and select the bitmap that you want. So now we've added the color map. The main diffuse map goes into the diffuse slot. This controls the color. And you can manipulate this with, for example, if you go down to, let's see, we want to use a multiply. RGB multiply, there we go. Okay, So you've got one color, and let's say we want just another color, just a V-Ray color. So you can use any color that you want. Let's make it red. Let's go with red. Add it in there, and it'll multiply these two colors, and you'll end up with a red color. See, so that's just one way you can do it inside V-Ray. Now, if you render it out, you'll see we've got some color happening, but it's still not great. And let me show you why. Let's go to our little light that I've created beforehand, and we'll up the intensity on this one to 20, and we'll zoom in on this little garment of ours and render it out again. So now you can see we have some color happening on it, but it's still completely flat. If you look at the edge, it's completely flat. So this is where we start looking at normal mapping or bump mapping. A normal map is usually this bluish color, this bluish purple color. It defines how the light should react to the surface and adds a little free detail. You can call it free detail to a low poly mesh like this, because you see this is pretty low poly. To use the map, you're going to go to your material. Let's open up our material browser, and you import your bump map. And in the bump map settings, you just want to make sure that there is no color correction applied to it. So check for anything that says color correction, and it looks like we don't have any color correction applied to this. So that's good. And then we add this to our bump slot. So now, if you render this out again, you can see that we have some fine detail happening on the surface of this garment. And you can control the amount that the bump adds. If you go double click on the material, you go down to the maps area, you'll see that you have in the bump area you have 30, which is a good value. And that controls how much bump is added from the normal map. The other PBR maps that are included are the roughness map. This controls the reflection or the micro surface of the material. And if you look at the roughness map, let's just open it up. It looks a lot like the diffuse map, except this map tells the computer which parts of the surface is rough and which parts of the surface is smooth. So the white parts will be completely rough, and black parts will be completely smooth, but we don't have any black parts, so this garment is pretty rough. Okay, so we're going to add in our roughness map. We already did that, and we're going to add it to the roughness slot. So now if you render that out, you'll see that we have some reflections, some subtle reflections happening, and more roughness happening in between. And then the last map that you can add from a PBR map, well, not the last map, there are a bunch of maps, but typically you'll get these 4 maps with every PBR material, is the displacement map. So the displacement map also adds detail to this material, almost like the normal map does, except a normal map adds faux surface detail to the material, whereas a displacement map will actually look at the mesh and the vertices and will deform the mesh based on the map that you've given it. Just giving an example, it's probably going to be yes, there you go. So as you can see, the displacement map has deformed this mesh, this material completely. So it doesn't just add a little bit of detail, it completely changed it. So usually you don't want this. This is useful for when you're making grass or stuff like that, which I do not recommend. There are better ways of doing it. So you want to go back to your material to fix this. You go to the material editor, you go into your maps, and in your displacement map, you want to crank this number down to like 5%, which is a good number for microsurface displacement. And now if we render this out, now you'll see we have all the bump mapping happening on the surface as well. Well, that's it. That's how you do a quick cloth simulation, and you add PBR materials to it and render it out with V-Ray. Thanks for watching.